I sense a disturbance in the force. Kusanagi's channel is blowing up. Good for him. But he spoiled Chainsaw Man on his first video. And for that, he must suffer.
A million subs! I think I need to finish this video. Hey, what's up guys? That was a scary nightmare to have, but we have some juicy things to talk about today. Like that one time I was able to make 16 pages of manga in 14 hours. But before we talk about that, let's talk about something very important. What makes a good manga a good manga? And while you're hopefully seriously thinking about the answer to my question, let me show you something from about 4 or 5 years ago when I took a beginner manga course here in Tokyo. Now, I'm not going to tell you about the whole experience because I'm going to save that for a future episode, but this will give you a hint about what we are going to talk about today. Now, this was graded by a mangaka who served as our sensei, as our teacher during that course, and thankfully I got a very good here. Okay, so now back to the million-dollar question. What makes a good manga a good manga? And in fact, what makes a good manga a great manga? Did you say good art? Nah, that's just third place. A good story? Kinda true, but not really. It's only secondary. I think the most important thing is how the story is presented. The delivery of the story. The delivery is always more important than the message itself because it affects what kind of feeling the receiver is left with after all is said and done. Consider the nightmare I had a while ago about Kylo Ren wanting to make me suffer because I spoiled one measly detail about Chainsaw Man in my first video. Okay, that's kind of big. If I were to tell you the same story, but in a different way, you might also think differently of my intent as the director. Let me show you.
Hi, yeah, I sense a disturbance in the force. Yeah, Kusanagi's channel is blowing up. I mean, good for him. But he spoiled Chainsaw Man in his first episode. His first episode! I think, for what he did, he must suffer, right? Yeah, okay. He will suffer.
Okay, now obviously there was an exaggeration in my example, but even subtle differences in movement, camera placement, line delivery, and other aspects can mean the difference between a good movie and a great movie, or between a dark movie and a comedy one. And in a similar way, the presentation of the story is first and foremost in manga. What makes manga as a medium inherently different from other media is the arbitrary nature of how readers consume it. If you're watching an anime or a movie, there's a natural progression over time as each frame is displayed at controlled intervals, which is 24 frames per second by current standards. Now, this method of delivering a story has an inherent advantage in keeping people engaged because the audience has a more passive experience and they have to pay attention because they might miss something if they close their eyes or they look away. Now, this fear of missing something is alleviated by the addition of dialogue and music, but we're not going to talk about those because we're focusing on the visual aspects today. Reading manga is a more active experience because readers can go at their own pace. There are natural restrictions, of course, with how much information can be displayed because of the real estate of each page, but for the most part, readers can pick up and choose what their eyes look at any given point in time. Now, it's a job of the mangaka to make that experience as fluid as possible by taking advantage of the inherent restrictions of the medium. In most situations, the considerations on how to make the scenes fluid affect the framing of each individual panel. Okay, it's the next day, and I have a bunch of things that I want to show you, but before I do that, I have an announcement to make. I now have a Patreon account. This channel has now grown to over 9,000 warriors strong, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you that subscribed in the past few weeks. As you all can guess, I'm working very hard on this channel so that hopefully one day I can make it as a full-time content creator here on YouTube so I can have more time to do the things that I like for example making art, making manga, entertaining people, making videos, and inspiring others anywhere in the world. And among the over 9,000 people in the community, there are a few people that have suggested making a Patreon account. so I'm going to try it out. I'm pretty new to this stuff, so there's only one tier for now, and that is the Squire tier for $5. And if you choose to support me with what amounts to basically 2 Genshin Impact wishes per month, you know who you are, or 2 cups of coffee, you'll get access to a Discord server that I made so we can build a community of supporters. Also, every 2 weeks, I'll give you 2 exclusive downloadable illustrations, which are actually playing card designs, so there'll be a full deck in about a year. And also for any manga contests that I join, let's say for example Silent Manga Edition 19, the focus of this season's vlog, you'll have an exclusive sneak peek of some of the pages after I submit them. But why only some? It's because I don't think I'll be legally allowed to show you full works until the contest results are announced. Your boy is not trying to get sued here, okay? And also, depending on the number of patrons, I will shout you out at the end of every video. So that's it. Only one experimental tier for now, but that is subject to change. Comment down below what you think about this. And before I forget, once again, this is optional. You are in no way, shape, or form obligated to support me through Patreon. Watching my videos is enough, but I will appreciate you a little bit more if you do become a patron. And now, back to your regular programming. This is a script. Not my script, it's actually a transcript of The Godfather, a great movie. But if you're planning to make a manga page, you're probably going to need something like that before you start. Now, I'm not in the business of teaching, so I'm not going to tell you how to write a script because there are so many resources out there that you can check out. But one thing I'm going to say, especially if you're just the writer of a manga and you're not actually the one who's drawing the panels, please make sure to consider how big the speech bubbles are and how long your dialogue or your line is, because sometimes writers fall into the trap of making overly long lines that don't actually fit into the speech bubbles, and that creates a lot of problems for the artist.
Okay, time for a pop quiz. What do these different types of paper have in common? Well, if you've answered they're all painful substitutes for tissue paper in a pinch, that's true, but that's a weird answer. These are all things you can use to draft your manga. Depending on where you are in the manga making process as well as your workflow, the type of draft that you will make and the type of paper that you use might be different.
Most artists would actually start off with something like this. Now, this is not my draft, this is just a representation of something that artists usually do, and that is to make very short thumbnail sketches and drafts on pieces of paper that they find lying around, or a small notebook that they carry around everywhere with them. Now, as you can see from this draft, there's barely any detail, and there's one crucial thing that's missing here, which is the text. There's no text in here because this type of thing is only used as a reference for the artist for the positioning of the characters, the speech bubbles, and the flow of the overall manga. This is not something you actually show to somebody else. But if you're at the point where you do have to show something to your editor, or what we call a tanto, or person in charge here in Japan, you would show them something like this. Now, this is basically what we call the name, which is the storyboard or the draft, before you actually go into finishing your page. This includes the text, of course, the characters with more detailed expressions. Still barely any detail here, but you can make out where the characters are, what kind of backgrounds you might include in the page, and of course the positioning of the text and the sound effects as well. If your name gets approved and you finally got the go-ahead from your editor and you're ready to finalize your pages, you can work on drafting paper like this. Now, this is actually not a professional drafting paper. This is mostly used by indies or doujinshi artists, but this type of paper is very thick, absorbs ink very well, and has markings, hopefully you can see that, has markings that you can use as guidelines for your manga page. Once again, this is for indies. If you're a pro or you want to go pro, you're going to need something big and thick, something like this. Now, this manuscript paper the size of a corgi is what traditional artists use when they're finalizing their pages. It absorbs ink very well, and it's also got the markings over here for your guideline. And once you have finished drafting and then inking your page, you'll be left with something like this. Now, this is something I worked on for the beginner manga course that I attended a few years ago, but this is not something we'll talk about today. And that's because I want to focus on 2 things that I worked on in the past. The first being this 3-page manga, and this 16-page manga that I finished in 14 hours. So let's start off by talking about this manga right here. And I think one of the interesting things about this manga, and one of the reasons why I want to talk about this, is because I did not draft the manga for this.
This goes all the way back to 2019, almost 4 years ago, when I saw this contest posting on a website called medibang.com. And I found it very interesting because 1, the prize was 1 million Japanese yen, meaning that if I win, I wouldn't have to survive off of cup ramen just to pay my bills. And 2, because one of the ways to enter is by completing a manuscript based on a name that they have provided. And I thought that was a very interesting format for a manga contest, so why not join? I took a look at the 3-page name and I thought to myself at that time that this was a very straightforward paneling and layout for a manga. Fast forward 4 years later and now I'm thinking this name would be a perfect practical example for showing what a typical manga flow is. Japanese manga, by virtue of Japanese print media, is read from right to left and top to bottom. That's why if you're a mangaka, you always have to be careful to arrange your elements so you can guide the reader's eyes to follow the so-called natural Z pattern. And when I say elements, I mean anything on the page with any distinct shape or form, including the text, the speech bubbles, the characters, any significant objects, the speed lines, and the sound effects. Also, one interesting side note here is that the one who made the draft wrote down some general directions for the scene as well as how the monster should look like. This is akin to what a writer would say to an artist if they were working as a duo. Think Bakuman, for example, or Death Note. Here's the final page that I ended up with, and it's important to note here if you're an artist that you don't have to follow your name to a T. You can make some changes depending on how you see them fit the page better. So I'd say overall this was a very interesting project/experience for me, and I gained a lot of learnings from it. And for those of you that weren't aware of this information beforehand, I hope that you learned a lot from it too.
Okay, so for anyone wondering, the link for the contest will be down below. And no, I did not win. There were so many good artists that won the contest, and yeah, just go check them out. But for me, it was just a very good learning experience, so I had to do it. And one thing I have to do now is to actually show you this thing right here, which is the 16-page manga that I finished in 14 hours.
And the deep dark secret about this manga that I don't recommend to anyone who's an artist is that I did not make a name for this. I went straight from concept to the final pages.
Yeah, you heard that right. I did not make a full draft of pages like this to make this.
Actually, at first, I wasn't even planning to submit anything for that round of Cited Manga audition. It was September 2019 and I was very busy at the time. Making manga pages was the last thing on my mind, so every day when I got home, I would wind down and de-stress the best way I could by playing Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro, as a lot of people know, is a challenging game, especially when you're just starting out. But I love challenges and it wasn't my first rodeo. At that point, I had already finished the game several times and I just wanted to get all the achievements. And then the day came, September 27, 2019. I finally got all the achievements for Sekiro. There was nothing else to do. I uninstalled the game, found myself online, and somehow decided to check the deadline for Silent Manga Audition 12. It was posted online, September 30, 2019. I had a few days left. I had a few hours left after work each day for the next 3 days before the deadline. But remember what I said a while ago. I love challenges. I had to think quick though. The theme was a new beginning, and I thought I had the perfect concept for it. You see, at that point I had replayed Sekiro several times, so it was fresh on my mind how I started every loop. Choosing New Game Plus. That was it. The title, Plus. The concept was overcoming challenges and taking on new ones. Each time a new beginning. I started with one panel in my head, because I have this bad habit of focusing on the most interesting panels and pages of a manga and then forgetting to draft the rest of the pages. But this time I had an excuse. I was running out of time, so I had to improvise as I was working on each page. That's why my initial first page became the second page, because I wanted to make it a page turn reveal. And then my robotic armed shonen character came into existence. And for the most part, that's how the rest of the pages came to life. The cycle went like this: conceptualize a panel, sketch the panel, ink the panel. That's how it went for the rest of the process, taking an average of about 52 minutes per page across 3 days. Once again, if you're planning to become a manga artist, avoid this type of approach. With this haphazard process, there are concessions. You may or may not have noticed that there are mostly no backgrounds in these panels, and the mechanical adversaries have very simplistic shapes and forms. I could have added also additional pages to explain the story even better. Now, I could spin the story and tell you that this was a stylistic choice based on the concept that I had, but deep inside, I regret not being able to work on this a little bit more, because I ended up not winning any prize for this. There was no feedback given to non-winners, so from time to time I still speculate what I could have improved, and I have some ideas, but I'll never know for sure until maybe in the future, when I get the chance to meet the editors and judges. And hopefully by that time, I would have gotten rid of my bad habits as a mangaka.
And there you have it. Those are some of my thoughts about storyboarding and some things that I did that you should not do. But whatever your takeaway from this video was, I hope you enjoyed it, and I want to let you guys know that the next few uploads will still be about art and manga. One being hopefully about my art progress, and the other one being a continuation of this and basically the drafting for the Silent Manga Audition 19 contest entry that I'm planning to make. So I hope to see you in the next video, but before I go, my friend Kado and I have one more surprise left for you. Let's go.